I woke up bleeding at 6 months pregnant after my husband beat me, because I supposedly disrespected his mother. And when the ER nurse walked in and said she recognized him from another woman's case, everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattered in an instant. My name is Emma. I'm 28 years old. And this is the story of how one violent night revealed a pattern of abuse I never saw coming, and how I found the strength to rebuild my life when I thought I had nothing left. It started on a Tuesday evening in November. The rain was hammering against our apartment windows in downtown Seattle, creating that rhythmic sound that usually made me feel cozy and safe. But that night, there was nothing cozy about what was happening inside our home. I had just gotten back from my prenatal appointment, exhausted from the long wait at the clinic, and the discomfort of carrying what felt like a bowling ball pressing against every organ in my body. My ankles were swollen, my back ached, and all I wanted was to put my feet up and maybe eat something that didn't immediately trigger heartburn. My mother-in-law, Patricia, had been staying with us for the past 2 weeks, supposedly to help prepare for the baby's arrival. But her version of helping involved rearranging everything I had carefully organized, criticizing every decision I made about the nursery, and making passive-aggressive comments about how her son deserved better meals than what I was preparing. That evening, she had decided that the dresser I had chosen for the baby's room was completely wrong, too modern, not practical enough, and she had already ordered a different one without consulting me. When I came home and saw the confirmation email open on her laptop, something inside me just snapped. I was tired, hormonal, and honestly fed up with being treated like a guest in my own home. So I told her, as calmly as I could manage, that I appreciated her input, but I had already chosen the furniture, and I would prefer if she consulted me before making purchases for my baby's nursery. My voice was steady, respectful even, but I stood my ground. Patricia's face turned red immediately. She stood up from the couch, her whole body rigid with indignation, and started yelling about how ungrateful I was, how she was only trying to help, how I clearly had no idea what I was doing as a first-time mother, and how dare I speak to her that way after everything she had done for us. Her voice got louder and louder, echoing through our small apartment, and I just stood there, one hand protectively on my belly, trying to understand how asking to be consulted about my own baby's room had turned into this explosive confrontation. That's when Daniel came home. My husband of 3 years, the man I had fallen in love with in college, the man who had proposed to me on a beach in Oregon with tears in his eyes, walked through the door right in the middle of his mother's tirade. I actually felt relief when I saw him, thinking he would calm her down, mediate, help her understand that I wasn't being disrespectful, just asserting reasonable boundaries. But Daniel didn't look at his mother. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, something cold and hard that made my stomach drop. His mother immediately turned to him, her voice switching from anger to victimhood in an instant, telling him how I had been so rude to her, how I had raised my voice, how I had made her feel unwelcome in her own son's home. None of it was true, but she delivered it with such conviction, such wounded dignity, that I saw Daniel's expression darken even further. Before I could explain, before I could tell my side, Daniel took 3 steps toward me and screamed in my face, louder than I had ever heard him yell before. "How dare you disrespect her? How dare you make my mother feel unwelcome? She came here to help us, to help you, and this is how you treat her?" His face was inches from mine, spit flying from his mouth as he shouted, and I instinctively took a step back, my hands going protectively over my pregnant belly. I tried to speak, tried to explain, but he wasn't listening. He kept yelling, his mother standing behind him with her arms crossed, nodding along to every accusation. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "If you can't respect my mother, you don't respect me, and I won't tolerate that in my house." His house. Not our house. His house. That's when he grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my flesh hard enough to leave marks, and he shook me, still yelling. I told him to stop, that he was hurting me, that I was pregnant, but it was like he couldn't hear me anymore. Or maybe he just didn't care. Then he shoved me, hard, and I stumbled backward, trying to catch myself, but my balance was all off because of the pregnancy. I fell against the coffee table, the edge catching me right in the side, and the pain was immediate and terrifying. I remember lying on the floor, gasping, feeling something warm spreading between my legs, and the panic that seized me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The baby. Something was wrong with the baby. I looked up at Daniel, expecting horror, expecting him to immediately call for help, but he just stood there, frozen, his mother behind him with her hand over her mouth. If you're listening to this story and it's resonating with you, or if you want to hear how this unfolds, please consider subscribing to the channel. We're working toward our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription means the world to me. Just click that subscribe button and join this community of people sharing real stories and supporting each other. It was actually me who managed to pull out my phone and call 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial, but I got through and told them I was pregnant and bleeding and I needed help. The operator stayed on the line with me, asking me questions, telling me to stay calm. That help was coming. Those minutes waiting for the ambulance felt like hours. The pain in my side was intense, but worse was the terror that I was losing my baby, that this tiny person I had been talking to and singing to and dreaming about was slipping away because of what had just happened. The paramedics arrived, and they were incredible, professional and calm and reassuring, even though I could see the concern in their eyes. They got me on a stretcher, checked my vitals, started an IV, and loaded me into the ambulance. Daniel tried to get in with me, but one of the paramedics told him he could follow in his own car, that they needed space to work. I was grateful for that, because I couldn't look at him. I couldn't process what had just happened. The emergency room at Harborview Medical Center was bright and busy and overwhelming. They wheeled me straight into a trauma bay, and suddenly there were people everywhere, doctors and nurses moving around me with practiced efficiency, asking questions, attaching monitors, checking the baby's heartbeat. The sound of that heartbeat on the monitor, fast but steady, made me sob with relief. The baby was still alive. That was all that mattered in that moment. They did an ultrasound right there in the trauma bay, and the technician kept reassuring me that the baby looked okay, moving around, heart rate strong. But I was still bleeding, and they needed to figure out why. The doctor, a woman probably in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, explained that I had likely sustained a placental abruption, where the placenta partially separates from the uterine wall. It was serious, potentially life-threatening for both me and the baby. But if we could get the bleeding under control, and if the separation wasn't too extensive, there was a chance we would both be okay. They admitted me for monitoring, moving me to a labor and delivery room where they could keep constant watch on both my condition and the baby's. The contractions had started, irregular but painful, and they were trying to stop them because it was way too early for the baby to be born. I was hooked up to so many machines, so many bags of fluid and medication, feeling helpless and terrified and completely alone, even though there were nurses checking on me constantly. Daniel showed up about an hour after I had been admitted. He came into my room with flowers, actual flowers, like this was a normal hospital visit, and not the result of him physically assaulting his pregnant wife. He tried to take my hand and I pulled away. He started apologizing, saying he didn't know what came over him, that he had never done anything like that before, and would never do it again, that he was just so stressed about the baby and work and having his mother stay with us. And he just snapped. But I couldn't even look at him. All I could think about was the feeling of his hands on me, the rage in his eyes, the complete disregard for me and our baby in that moment. And his mother, who had stood there and watched it happen and done nothing. Where was she now? Was she in the waiting room, telling anyone who would listen that this was somehow my fault? A nurse came in to check my vitals, and the moment she saw Daniel, her entire demeanor changed. Her name was Rachel. I remember because her badge was right at eye level when she leaned over to adjust my IV. She was probably in her mid-30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, and these sharp, observant eyes that seemed to take in everything. She looked at Daniel, then at me, then back at Daniel, and something clicked in her expression. Then she said something that made the entire room freeze. "I know you. You were here about 8 months ago with another woman who came in with injuries. She was pregnant too. Your subscription really does make a difference. If this story is keeping you engaged, click that red subscribe button right now and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. It takes just a second, and it means you'll never miss these important stories." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's face went completely white, then red, then white again. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I stared at him, trying to process what the nurse had just said. Another woman. 8 months ago. Pregnant. Injuries. Rachel continued, her voice steady and professional, but with an edge of steel that made it clear she was not going to be intimidated. I never forget a face, especially not in situations like these. The woman's name was Jennifer. She came in with a broken wrist and bruising around her ribs. She said she fell down the stairs, but we all knew what really happened. You left before we could get social services involved. Daniel finally found his voice, and he started denying it, saying she must have him confused with someone else, that he had never been here before, that he would never hurt anyone. But his panic was obvious, his words tumbling over each other, and I could see the truth written all over his face. I felt like I couldn't breathe. All this time I had thought I was special, that our relationship was different, that the man I married would never hurt me. But I wasn't the first. There had been someone before me, another pregnant woman, another victim of his violence. And he had gotten away with it because she had protected him, or been too scared to tell the truth. Or maybe he had convinced her it was her fault, just like he was trying to convince me now. Rachel turned to me, her expression softening. "Sweetie, I need you to tell me the truth about what happened tonight. Did he do this to you? Did he cause your injuries?" And in that moment, I had a choice. I could protect him like Jennifer apparently had. I could say I fell, make up some story, preserve the illusion of my marriage and my family, or I could tell the truth and face whatever came after. I looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and I saw not the man I had married, but a stranger who had shown me exactly who he was when he thought he could get away with it. A man who had done this before and would do it again. A man who had put both me and our baby in danger and then shown up with flowers like that could fix everything. So I told the truth. Yes. He pushed me. We had an argument about his mother, and he grabbed me and shoved me, and I fell against the coffee table. That's why I'm here. Rachel nodded, squeezed my hand, and said she would be right back. When she left the room, Daniel immediately started in on me, his voice low and urgent, telling me I was making a huge mistake, that I was going to destroy our family, that I was overreacting, that if I just told them it was an accident, everything would be fine. But I turned my face away from him and refused to engage. Rachel came back with a social worker and a police officer. They asked Daniel to wait outside, and even though he protested, saying he had a right to be there for his wife, they were firm. This was a medical and legal situation now, and he needed to leave the room. The police officer, a woman named Detective Sarah Morrison, was incredibly kind and patient as she took my statement. She asked detailed questions about what had happened, about our relationship, about whether there had been any previous incidents of violence. I told her everything, the yelling, the control, the way he had isolated me from my friends over the past year. Always with reasonable-sounding excuses, but resulting in me being more and more dependent on him. The social worker, whose name was Marcus, talked to me about my options. He explained that I could file for a protection order, that there were resources available for women in my situation, that I didn't have to go home with Daniel when I was discharged. He gave me phone numbers for domestic violence shelters and support groups, and he told me that whatever I decided, there were people who would help me. It was overwhelming. Just hours ago, I had been a married woman preparing for my first child, excited about becoming a mother, planning a nursery. Now I was a domestic violence victim being told I might need to go to a shelter because my home wasn't safe. Take your time and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support helps keep this channel going and helps us build a community where people can share these difficult but important stories. Click subscribe and let's get to 1,000 subscribers together. They kept me in the hospital for 3 days. The bleeding eventually stopped, the contractions calmed down with medication, and the baby, miraculously, seemed to be okay. The doctors warned me that I was now high risk, that the abruption could happen again, that I would need to be monitored closely for the rest of the pregnancy. But my baby was alive, and I was alive, and that felt like a miracle. Daniel was arrested that first night. Detective Morrison told me they had enough evidence from my statement, the medical records, and Rachel's testimony about the previous incident to charge him with assault and domestic violence. He made bail the next morning, but there was a no-contact order in place, which meant he legally couldn't come near me or try to reach out. But of course he tried. He called from his mother's phone, from work phones, from numbers I didn't recognize. He sent emails and texts from accounts I didn't know he had. All of them were variations on the same theme, apologizing, begging me to drop the charges, promising he would change, threatening that I was destroying our family, insisting that I was overreacting and making everything worse than it needed to be. I forwarded every message to Detective Morrison, and each one just added to the case against him. My parents drove up from California the day after it happened. My mom cried when she saw me in that hospital bed, and my dad looked like he wanted to find Daniel and finish what the justice system had started. But mostly they were just there, present and supportive, and not judging me for the choices I had made, or questioning why I hadn't seen the warning signs earlier. Because the truth is, there had been warning signs. The way Daniel would sulk for days if I made plans without consulting him first. The way he criticized my appearance, always framed as concern for my health or helpful suggestions, but leaving me feeling inadequate and unattractive. The way he managed our finances, giving me an allowance like I was a child rather than a partner. The way he had gradually convinced me that my friends were bad influences, that my family didn't understand our relationship, that he was the only one who really cared about me. I had explained it all away, told myself that every couple had issues, that marriage required compromise, that his intensity was just how much he loved me. But it wasn't love. It was control. And it had escalated to violence the moment I tried to assert any independence or set any boundaries. My best friend from college, Maya, flew in from Boston. She came into my hospital room, took one look at me, and started crying. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I should have called more, visited more. I knew something was off, but I talked myself out of it. I told her it wasn't her fault, that Daniel had been very skilled at isolating me, at making me believe that pulling away from my friends was my own choice. Maya had always seen through him, even back when we first started dating. She had told me once that there was something about the way he looked at me that made her uncomfortable, like he was cataloging my weaknesses rather than admiring my strengths. But I had been so in love, so sure that she just didn't understand him, and I had let that create distance between us. Now she was here, and she was furious on my behalf, and she was already making plans. She told me I could come stay with her in Boston if I wanted, that she had a spare room, that she would help me figure everything out. Or if I wanted to stay in Seattle, she would help me find a place, get set up, whatever I needed. The point was, I had options. I wasn't trapped. If this story is touching your heart, or making you think differently about relationships and red flags, please subscribe to the channel. We're building a community here and we want you to be part of it. Hit that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. The hospital social worker, Marcus, came by every day to check on me. He brought information about support groups for domestic violence survivors, about therapy options, about legal aid if I couldn't afford an attorney for the protection order and eventual divorce proceedings. He never pushed, never made me feel like I had to make any decisions right away, just consistently reminded me that resources existed and people were ready to help when I was ready. Detective Morrison came by on my second day to update me on the case. She had tracked down Jennifer, the other woman Rachel had mentioned. Jennifer had been hesitant to talk at first, but when she learned there was another victim, she agreed to give a statement. She told a story that was eerily similar to mine. She and Daniel had dated for 2 years, gotten engaged, and she had gotten pregnant. He had been controlling throughout the relationship, but she had explained it away as him being protective. Then one night, they had an argument about wedding plans, specifically about her wanting to invite friends he didn't approve of, and he had grabbed her, shaken her, and thrown her against a wall, breaking her wrist. She had gone to the emergency room and told them she fell down the stairs. Daniel had been with her the whole time, coaching her on what to say, and she had been too scared and ashamed to tell the truth. A few weeks later, she had a miscarriage. The doctors couldn't say for certain if it was related to the assault, but the timing was suspicious. After that, Jennifer had left him, moved to a different state, changed her name, and tried to start over. But when Detective Morrison contacted her and told her about my case, Jennifer said she wanted to help. She was willing to testify, to tell the truth this time about what Daniel had done to her. It wouldn't undo what had happened to her, but maybe it would help ensure justice for me and protect any future women who might cross his path. Hearing Jennifer's story broke my heart, but also made me angry. How many women had Daniel hurt? How long had he been getting away with this? And what about his mother? Patricia had watched him assault me and done nothing. Had she known about Jennifer? Had there been others before Jennifer? The more I learned, the clearer it became that I had never really known the man I married. I had fallen in love with a carefully constructed persona, a mask he wore to lure women in before gradually revealing his true nature once they were committed and vulnerable. On my 3rd day in the hospital, a lawyer named Rebecca Chen came to see me. She had been recommended by the domestic violence advocacy organization Marcus had connected me with, and she specialized in family law cases involving abuse. She sat down next to my bed and explained, in clear, straightforward terms, what the legal process would look like going forward. First, the criminal case. Daniel had been charged with felony assault and domestic violence. With my testimony, Jennifer's testimony, and the medical evidence, Rebecca was confident there would be a conviction, or at least a plea deal. That process could take months, but I wouldn't be alone in it. The prosecutor's office had victim advocates who would keep me informed and support me through the trial if it came to that. Second, the protection order. I had a temporary order in place, but we would need to go to court for a permanent one. Rebecca would represent me in that hearing, and given the circumstances, she was confident the judge would grant it. Third, divorce. Rebecca would file the papers immediately if I wanted. Given Daniel's criminal charges and the no-contact order, the court would likely grant me temporary custody of the baby once born, temporary use of our apartment, and temporary financial support. The final divorce could take longer, but I would be protected in the meantime. It was a lot to process, but Rebecca was patient and answered all my questions. She also told me something that stuck with me. You are not responsible for what he did. You did nothing wrong. The only person responsible for his violence is him. I needed to hear that, because part of me kept replaying that night, wondering if I should have approached the situation with his mother differently, if I could have de-escalated, if I had somehow provoked him. But no. I had set a reasonable boundary in a respectful way. His reaction was not normal, not acceptable, and not my fault. Subscribe if you're finding value in this story and want to be part of this community. We're so close to our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Click that subscribe button, and let's keep growing together. I was discharged from the hospital with strict instructions. Bed rest as much as possible, no stress, frequent monitoring appointments, and immediate return to the ER if I experienced any bleeding or contractions. My parents took me to their hotel, where they had booked a suite with an extra bedroom for me. I couldn't go back to the apartment I had shared with Daniel. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The first few days after discharge were a blur. I slept a lot, partly from exhaustion and partly because sleep was the only escape from the anxiety and fear and overwhelming sense of loss. I wasn't just grieving the end of my marriage. I was grieving the future I had imagined, the family I thought we would be, the safety and security I had believed I had. My mom stayed with me constantly, bringing me food, helping me to the bathroom, sitting quietly nearby when I didn't want to talk. My dad made phone calls, coordinated with the lawyer, dealt with the practical aspects of separating my life from Daniel's. Maya came by every day, sometimes just to sit with me, sometimes to distract me with stories from her work or funny videos she found online. The support group Marcus had recommended met twice a week at a community center not far from my parents' hotel. I was nervous about going, afraid of being judged, afraid of having to talk about what happened, afraid of not fitting in. But Maya offered to drive me to the first meeting, and my mom encouraged me to at least try it once. The meeting was nothing like I expected. There were about 10 women there, ranging in age from early 20s to late 60s, from all different backgrounds and circumstances. But we all had one thing in common. We had all experienced intimate partner violence, and we were all trying to rebuild our lives. The group leader, a woman named Sandra who had survived an abusive marriage herself, created a space that felt safe and non-judgmental. We went around the circle introducing ourselves, and when it was my turn, I just said my name and that I was pregnant and recently left an abusive relationship. That was enough. Nobody pushed for details. Over the next few weeks, as I continued to attend the meetings, I gradually shared more of my story. And I heard theirs. Stories of women who had been beaten, strangled, threatened, controlled, isolated, gaslit. Women who had left and gone back multiple times before finally getting out for good. Women who had lost custody of their children because the system failed them. Women who had rebuilt entire lives from nothing and were now thriving. Their stories were heartbreaking, but they were also inspiring. These were survivors, fighters, women who refused to let what happened to them define their entire existence. And slowly, I started to see myself that way too. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. The legal processes moved forward. Rebecca filed for divorce and for a permanent protection order. Daniel fought both, claiming through his lawyer that I was exaggerating, that it had been a one-time incident blown out of proportion, that he deserved access to his child. But Jennifer's testimony, combined with Rachel the nurse's statement and the medical evidence, painted a clear picture of a pattern of abuse. The hearing for the permanent protection order was one of the hardest days of my life. I had to sit in a courtroom and recount, in detail, what Daniel had done to me. His lawyer tried to make me seem unreliable, emotional, vindictive. But Rebecca had prepared me well, and I stayed calm and factual. When Jennifer testified and told her story, I saw the judge's expression harden. When Rachel took the stand and described seeing Daniel at the hospital with 2 different pregnant women who had been injured, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The judge granted the permanent protection order for 5 years and included provisions protecting the baby once born. Daniel was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me at all times, to have no contact directly or through third parties, and to surrender any firearms he owned. As I left the courthouse that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not happiness, not yet, but genuine hope that maybe I could build a safe life for myself and my baby. I want to pause here and ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. This story represents so many women's experiences, and by supporting this channel, you're helping create awareness about domestic violence and supporting survivors. Click subscribe and be part of this important community as we work toward 1,000 subscribers. I moved into my own apartment a month after getting out of the hospital. It was small, just a one-bedroom in a building with security cameras and a doorman, because I still felt afraid that Daniel might show up despite the protection order. My parents helped me furnish it. Maya sent care packages from Boston, and slowly it started to feel like home. The nursery came together piece by piece. I bought the dresser I had originally chosen, the one that had started the whole nightmare. Every time I looked at it, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. But I also felt proud that I had stuck to my choice, that I hadn't let Patricia or Daniel's violence take that decision away from me. My pregnancy continued to be high risk. I had appointments twice a week to monitor the baby and check for any signs that the abruption was recurring. Every appointment was nerve-wracking. But every time I heard that steady heartbeat and saw my baby moving around on the ultrasound screen, I felt grateful. The therapy I started attending, both individual and the domestic violence support group, helped me process what had happened and start to understand the dynamics of abusive relationships. I learned about the cycle of abuse, the honeymoon phase followed by tension, building followed by an acute incident, followed by reconciliation and calm. I realized that Daniel and I had been in that cycle for most of our relationship, but the escalations had been so gradual that I hadn't recognized it. I learned about trauma bonding, the psychological phenomenon that makes it hard to leave abusive relationships even when logically you know you should. The intense highs and lows create a powerful attachment that can feel like love, but is actually your nervous system responding to the unpredictability and danger. I learned that it wasn't my fault, that there was nothing I could have done differently to prevent his violence, that abusers are responsible for their own choices. That lesson was the hardest to internalize, because I kept replaying that night, kept thinking about all the ways I could have handled it differently. But my therapist kept bringing me back to the fundamental truth that setting a boundary about furniture should never result in violence. Nothing I did or said justified what he did. The criminal case moved toward trial. The prosecutor, a dedicated attorney named James Park, kept me informed every step of the way. Daniel's lawyer tried multiple times to get the charges reduced or dismissed, arguing that it was a first offense, that Daniel had no prior record, that he was a respected member of the community with a good job. But James fought back, using Jennifer's testimony to establish a pattern and arguing that this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment, but a demonstration of Daniel's true character. Eventually, faced with the overwhelming evidence, Daniel's lawyer advised him to take a plea deal. He pled guilty to assault in the second degree and domestic violence, and was sentenced to 18 months in jail with 3 years of probation after release. It wasn't as much time as I had hoped for, but it was something. And it meant I wouldn't have to testify in a trial, wouldn't have to be cross-examined by his lawyer, wouldn't have to sit in the same room as him for days. When I heard about the plea deal and sentencing, I felt a strange sense of closure. Justice would never undo what happened, would never give me back the innocence I had lost, or the sense of safety I once felt. But it acknowledged that what he did was wrong, that I wasn't crazy or overreacting, that his violence had real consequences. Your subscription helps this channel grow and reach more people who might need to hear these stories. If you've been listening and finding this valuable, please take a moment to click that subscribe button. We're building toward 1,000 subscribers and every single one matters. Help us get there by subscribing now. I gave birth to my daughter on a cold February morning. I was 37 weeks, just barely term, and my doctor had decided to induce labor because the risk of another abruption was too high to let me go any longer. My mom was with me the whole time, holding my hand through the contractions, encouraging me when I wanted to give up during transition, crying with me when my daughter finally emerged, tiny and perfect and screaming with healthy lungs. They laid her on my chest, this little person I had been protecting inside me all these months, and I looked into her scrunched-up face and felt a love so overwhelming it was almost painful. This was why I had fought so hard, why I had told the truth, why I had left. She deserved a life free from violence, a home where she felt safe, a mother who modeled what healthy relationships looked like. I named her Sophie Grace, Sophie because I had always loved the name. Grace because she was grace, undeserved favor, a second chance, a reminder that beauty could emerge from pain. The first few weeks of motherhood were exhausting and wonderful and terrifying. I was on my own, just me and Sophie in our little apartment, figuring out breastfeeding and diaper changes and why she was crying at 2 a.m. My mom stayed for 2 weeks to help, and Maya took time off work to come for a week after that. The women from my support group brought meals and offered to watch Sophie so I could shower or nap. I had been so afraid that I couldn't do it alone, that I needed a partner to raise a child. But I learned that I wasn't alone. I had a community, people who showed up and supported me and celebrated Sophie with me. And I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. Daniel sent a letter from jail about a month after Sophie was born. It came through his lawyer, so it didn't violate the protection order. The letter was long, rambling, full of apologies and explanations and promises to change. He said he had been going to anger management classes in jail, that he had been reflecting on his actions, that he wanted to be part of Sophie's life when he got out. I read it once, felt the familiar pull of his words trying to manipulate me into feeling sorry for him, and then I put it in a folder with all the other documentation from the case. I didn't respond. He didn't deserve a response. And Sophie didn't need a father who had proven he was violent and unpredictable and unwilling to take real responsibility for his actions. Rebecca advised me that when Daniel got out of jail, he might petition for visitation with Sophie. We would fight that, using the protection order, the history of violence, and his plea deal as evidence that he was a danger. There was a good chance the court would deny him unsupervised visitation at minimum, and possibly deny visitation entirely. But we would have to wait and see. For now, though, I focused on building a life. I went back to work part-time when Sophie was 3 months old, doing graphic design from home so I could be with her. The income wasn't much, but combined with the child support the court had ordered Daniel to pay and some financial help from my parents, we were managing. I slowly started rebuilding my social life. Maya visited as often as she could, and we video chatted every week. I reconnected with other friends from college who I had lost touch with during my marriage to Daniel. I made new friends through a new moms group at the library, women who were navigating first-time motherhood just like me. And I kept going to therapy and to my support group because healing wasn't linear. There were days when I felt strong and confident and proud of how far I had come. And there were days when I was triggered by something. A loud noise, a man who looked like Daniel, a scene in a TV show, and I would spiral into anxiety and fear and doubt. But those hard days became less frequent over time, and I got better at managing them when they came. I learned grounding techniques, breathing exercises, ways to calm my nervous system when it went into fight or flight mode. I learned to recognize my trauma responses and be gentle with myself, rather than judging myself for still struggling. If you're still with me on this journey, thank you. Your engagement means so much, and I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. We're creating a space for real stories, hard stories, stories that matter. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers by clicking that subscribe button right now. Sophie is 2 years old now as I'm recording this. She's talking in full sentences, running everywhere, fascinated by everything, full of joy and curiosity, and a stubborn independence that makes me smile every day. She looks like me, thankfully, with my dark hair and my nose. When I look at her, I don't see Daniel. I see possibility, hope, a future that is hers to create. We've settled into a routine, just the two of us. Mornings are for breakfast and cartoons. Midday is for playground time, or library visits. Afternoons are for naps and my work. Evenings are for dinner and bath and books before bed. It's simple, sometimes monotonous, but it's ours and it's safe and it's filled with love. Daniel got out of jail 8 months ago. He didn't petition for visitation with Sophie, which surprised me until I learned from Rebecca that he had moved to another state shortly after his release. Apparently he had met someone new, was starting over, probably telling her the same lies he told me in the beginning. I felt sorry for her, whoever she was. and I hoped she would see the warning signs earlier than I did. The protection order is still in place for 3 more years. After that, it expires unless I petition to renew it. Part of me wonders if I'll ever really feel safe, if I'll ever stop looking over my shoulder, if I'll ever fully trust someone again. But another part of me knows that what happened doesn't have to define the rest of my life. I've started dating again, very slowly, very cautiously. I told the guy I've been seeing for a few months now about my past, about Daniel, about the violence, and he listened without judgment. He told me he respected my boundaries, that we could move at whatever pace I needed, that he was in no rush. Time will tell if this relationship goes anywhere. But the fact that I was able to open myself up to the possibility feels like progress. The women from my support group have become some of my closest friends. We've been through hell together, shared our darkest moments, supported each other through the hard days. Some have moved on, rebuilt their lives, graduated from the group. Others are still working through their trauma, still finding their footing. But we're all fighters, all survivors, all proof that violence doesn't have to be the end of your story. I think about Jennifer sometimes, the woman who came before me. I reached out to her through Detective Morrison after the case was over, just to thank her for being willing to testify, for helping ensure Daniel faced consequences. We've emailed a few times and she's doing well, has remarried, has a child from her new relationship. She told me that testifying was one of the hardest things she ever did, but also one of the most healing, because it meant Daniel didn't get away with it anymore. And I think about Rachel, the nurse who recognized Daniel, who had the courage to speak up. I went back to the hospital a few months after Sophie was born, just to thank her. She hugged me and told me she was glad I had gotten out, that she sees too many women who don't. She said she never forgets a face, especially in situations like mine, because sometimes recognizing someone and speaking up can save a life. That night in the emergency room could have been the end of my story. Daniel's violence could have killed me or Sophie or both of us. But because Rachel spoke up, because Jennifer was willing to tell her truth, because I found the courage to tell mine, it wasn't the end. It was a turning point, a before and after, the beginning of a new chapter. I won't lie and say everything is perfect now. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still feel anxious in certain situations. I still grieve the marriage I thought I had, even though I know now it was based on lies and manipulation. Healing is messy and complicated and ongoing. But I'm here. Sophie is here. We're safe. We're healthy. We're building a life filled with love and laughter and hope. And that's something I never take for granted. Before I close, I want to make one more request. If this story has impacted you, if it's made you think or feel or understand something new about domestic violence, please subscribe to this channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Help us build a community where survivors can share their stories and know they're not alone. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support can help us get there. Click that subscribe button and be part of this important conversation. To anyone listening who might be in a situation like I was, please know that you deserve better. You deserve safety, respect, love that doesn't hurt. The violence is not your fault, and you don't have to stay. There are people who will help you, resources available, ways to get out even when it feels impossible. Call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, reach out to a local shelter, talk to a trusted friend or family member, tell your doctor or a nurse. Someone will believe you. Someone will help you. You are not alone, and you are worth fighting for. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And thank you for helping us grow by subscribing and sharing these important conversations. Together, we can break the silence around domestic violence and support survivors in rebuilding their lives. Click subscribe one more time if you haven't already, and let's continue this journey together toward healing and hope.